Why hello everybody, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. It is almost time to wish you all a happy 2017. And just as last year I showed you 15 favorite books from 2015, this year I thought I would show you 16 favorite books from 2016. Now these books are not in any particular order. Also, they did not all come out in 2016. They're just books that I have read during this past year. I thought I would try to preface each book with a little quotation. So our first quote is, "Do you find it easy to get drunk on words? So easy that, to tell you the truth, I am seldom perfectly sober." One of my favorite discoveries this year was the author Dorothy Sayers. I had never read her before, but I think I read 6 Lord Peter mysteries this year, and I know I'll be reading more. My favorite of all had to be Gaudy Night. This is one of the Lord Peter and Harriet Vane mysteries. I love the dynamic between the two of them. In Gaudy Night, you also get the magic of Oxford. Dorothy Sayers is so smart and literary, and I just love her writing. She has been such a treat to read this year. Her family, concerned, begged her to cheer up, but it appeared that she couldn't because she had been reading Othello in bed and was so overcome by the tragedy that the news of Colin's departure was the last straw. Another new to me author that I really enjoyed this year was Angela Thirkell. She is also so smart, so full of literary references, but also just delightfully cozy. These are such wonderful British tales and gentle romances. Many of them take place in this fictional county of Barsetshire, which Angela Thirkell actually borrowed from Anthony Trollope. Like Dorothy Sayers, I think I've read 5 or 6 Angela Thirkell books. This one here is Wild Strawberries, which I really liked. The one that the quotation came from is actually Summer Half. They were both so good. I really loved the P.G. Wodehouse school stories, so like the ones that take place in prep schools with cricket and schoolmasters and all that. Summer Half took place in a school, so I really enjoyed that. If you like more nice British houses and British families, then Wild Strawberries might be more your speed. But she found him interesting on the whole. Everyone interested the Schlegels on the whole at that time. I'm always reading classics, and a new to me classic author this year was E.M. Forster. I read Howard's End. I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. There was just so much good, amazing writing and also funny moments. Like the Schlegel sisters just have such a fun rapport, and they seem like they'd be fun to hang out with. Of course, this book does also have a more serious side. I wouldn't exactly describe it as happy, but I think in the end it is uplifting because it's about really connecting to other people, even people who see the world in a totally different way, trying to bridge that gap. There's also lots of London, which is really fun. She had the skill of remembering at all times who one was and where one came from, rather than bothering, as modern people did, with trying to guess where one was headed. That quotation was from The Awakening of Miss Prim by Natalia San Martin Fenolera. Now I have to admit that when I just walk into a library and pick up a recently released book, I don't always find myself loving those books. I don't always connect to them the way I do to classics. They just don't have the same kind of depth. But of course, there are always exceptions, and this was a delightful exception. This came out in 2013, and oh my gosh, I just loved it. It is cozy, it is literary, there's a little bit of a romance, there are lots of really thought-provoking conversations. I would definitely recommend it to everyone. The one sort of caveat I would have to say, though, is the ending just didn't quite make it there. It's like it was almost there, and I wanted it to make it there so bad, but it just kind of slipped off the tracks a little bit at the end. And yet, in spite of that, it is a delightful book. So many lovely things. I know I'll be coming back to it. He has a way of walking through conventions of that kind as if they did not exist, and being so much himself that soon people begin adapting themselves to him. This next book is Angle of Repose by Wallace Stegner. This is a very recent read. I just started it in December, and I have to admit I am not quite finished with it yet, but I am so absolutely confident that it is a top book of the year that I have no qualms sharing it with you guys. This is a frame story, so it is about a historian who is disabled and has come to his grandparents' house to live, and he is researching his grandparents' history. So you get some of his story, but then most of it is the story of the grandparents, and his grandmother is this extraordinary woman, so talented, artist, writer, very cultured, very bookish, interested in everything. She lives in the 1800s. She marries an engineer who goes out into the American West, out on the frontier, and it's not really where she expected her life to go. And yet, one of the messages that I love about this book is that you bring the culture where you go. You know, you don't need to be in a metropolis. You can kind of bring that standard with you, and you can find it as easily in the wilderness as you can in the city. The writing is just beautiful. The characters are awesome. Susan and Oliver, her husband. So many interesting themes. One of them that I loved was the importance of the past and kind of being rooted in where you came from. And that's one thing that this book has in common with Howard's End and The Awakening of Miss Prim. They all kind of fight back against this modern notion you sometimes see of, you know, being self-made or kind of not thinking history is important. Wallace Stegner writes, "My grandparents had to live their way out of one world and into another, or into several others, making new out of old, the way corals live their reef upward. I am on my grandparents' side. I believe in time as they did, and in the life chronological rather than in the life existential. We live in time and through it. We build our huts in its ruins, or used to, and we cannot afford all these abandonings." I love it though when books kind of are in conversation with each other, and Howard's End, The Awakening of Miss Prim, Angle of Repose, they all kind of had this same theme. The quotation that I read from The Awakening of Miss Prim had to do with that, and there's one quotation, just one more, from Howard's End that has the same idea. "One knew that she worshipped the past, and that the instinctive wisdom the past can alone bestow had descended upon her. That wisdom to which we give the clumsy name aristocracy. High-born she might not be, but assuredly she cared about her ancestors and let them help her." Definitely would recommend Angle of Repose, and you should also go read Howard's End and The Awakening of Miss Prim if you want to get more of the conversation on time and history I was talking about. "She always did the thing asked, because in obedience lay the integrity that God asked of her. If anyone had asked her what she meant by integrity, she would not have been able to tell them, but she had seen it once like a picture in her mind, a root going down into the earth and drinking deeply there. No one was really alive without that root." I read several Elizabeth Goudge novels this year, and it was so difficult to pick just one. I was really tempted to put two on this list, but in the end I went with The Scent of Water. This is just charming, beautiful, deep, inspiring, all around wonderful. Such a wonderful cast of characters in this little British village. Such a wonderful, again, sense of history, because you get to hear about the monastery that used to be there. And if you guys haven't read any Elizabeth Goudge by now, after me talking about it so long, I don't know what you're waiting for. Jesus sends forth his disciples not as holders of power or as masters of a law. He sends them forth into the world, asking them to live in the logic of love and selflessness. The Christian message is transmitted by embracing those in difficulty, by embracing the outcast, the marginalized, and the sinner. This year I read The Name of God is Mercy, which is by Pope Francis. It's actually a conversation between Pope Francis and a journalist, so you get the questions and then Pope Francis's answers, and it just makes it so accessible and so relatable, like it's just a conversation you're having. I just find things from this book keep popping back into my head, and you know, even though I think I read it during Lent, so that's months and months ago now. It just had a lot of really wonderful ideas in it. Pope Francis talks about the story of the prodigal son in this, and how people tend to identify either with the bad son who runs away, or with the kind of more righteous son who does the right thing but like doesn't get the fattened calf. And I liked Pope Francis saying that we're not called to be either of those sons. We're called to be like the father, who is forgiving and who welcomes the younger son back. And I just thought that was a really great way of kind of looking at it, that I hadn't thought of that story before. Neither gods nor men can be truly creative unless they are prepared to give themselves away. This is another nonfiction book. It's called A Short History of Myth by Karen Armstrong. I read this at the very beginning of the year, but I really enjoyed it. It's all about the importance of mythology throughout human history, and how religions and myth didn't develop accidentally. They developed to fill this human need that we still have, and that now that society is kind of moving away from spirituality and religions, that we were missing. I just thought there were lots of really amazing ideas in here. Really interesting stories from religions of every variety all around the world, like all different kinds of faith traditions, all the way back to the Paleolithic period, looking at how people have used myths and how important that has been in their lives. We turn to stories and pictures and music because they show us who and what and why we are, and what our relationship is to life and death. What is essential and what, despite the arbitrariness of falling beams, will not burn. Since we're on a nonfiction streak here, I might as well tell you about A Circle of Quiet. It's by Madeleine L'Engle. I loved this book so much. Madeleine L'Engle is, of course, the author of A Wrinkle in Time. This is kind of a biography, but also just a sort of reflective book about life, about faith, about writing. I would tend to read A Circle of Quiet like right when I got up in the morning or right before I was going to bed, and it was just kind of a lovely way to relax, really gentle, but also really deep and thought-provoking. I believe there are multiple journals in this Crosswicks series, so I definitely need to go and look up the rest of them. Her words were always like ready-made clothes and never fitted individual thoughts. This next book is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I've seen the movie, of course. I had never read the book. The book I was delighted to find is just as charming and cozy and wonderful as the movie. I love Molly Gibson. Even Cynthia and Mrs. Gibson mostly won me over in the end. I thought they were kind of annoying, but then I feel like I was comparing them against Jane Austen villains in my head, which is really not fair because Jane Austen makes her villains delicious, and like no one else can do villains and annoying people the way Jane Austen can. But Elizabeth Gaskell does come pretty close, and I really enjoyed Wives and Daughters. One warning I should say is that the book technically isn't finished, but it's really only missing like 1 or 2 chapters. Like, it is tied up, you just don't get the cherry on top. So I didn't really mind because, you know, I've seen the movie, so I can kind of just imagine that's the final chapter. But it is good to be aware. Okay, I think we just hit 10, right? That was 10 books. So the last 6 are obviously Jane Austen's 6 novels. I'm just kidding, you guys. I think I only reread like 3 this year, so it would be cheating to include all 6 of them. Anyway, but there is Jane Austen in this list. Seriously, what kind of list would this be without Jane Austen? This year I discovered What Matters in Jane Austen, 20 Crucial Puzzles Solved by John Mullen. I went to an Emma Day event with Kate Howe this year. It was so much fun. John Mullen was actually one of the speakers. So I looked up this book and oh my gosh, it's so good. It's one of the best, if not the best book about Jane Austen that I've read. So much has been written about Jane Austen that I feel like a lot of times people try to shock you or try to come up with these crazy theories just to be different, which I kind of resent, but on the other hand, I kind of respect because that's part of Jane Austen's magic, that she can appeal to such a huge variety of different mindsets and different people. John Mullen, though, I thought was really grounded and didn't try to twist Jane Austen to fit his pet philosophy. Instead, he looked at what Jane Austen actually says, what actually matters in Jane Austen. In fact, literally every single page is littered with Jane Austen quotations. And I think that's the best way because no one can say it better than Jane. So if you're going to write about her, you might as well put as much of her in it as you can. And constantly, like, huge chunks of every single page are just right out of the book. If you don't like Jane Austen, but are kind of interested in her and interested in what people see in her, I think this is a really great book. He does such a good job at kind of capturing these tiny things that make Jane Austen so magical. And it's hard. In fact, there's a quotation somewhere here about how Jane Austen is one of the hardest authors to catch in the act of greatness because she's so subtle that it's hard to pinpoint it, but he does a really great job of pinpointing it with really funny things like, why is it risky to go to the seaside? How much money is enough? Why is the weather important? Why do Jane Austen's plots rely on blunders? This was just so interesting, such a great kind of Jane Austen appreciation, Jane Austen textual analysis, overall great book. There was about her, small and ginghamed and sunbonneted as she was, a certain reserve and dignity and fineness that they resented. And they resented the level way she looked at them with that disdainful face under cloudy black hair, instead of being shy and drooping as became an interloper on probation. It will probably not surprise you to find Emily of New Moon on this list. I have really enjoyed reading this year. I just finished Emily Climbs, which was also lovely. I still have the last book in the series to finish. Anne of Green Gables was on my list last year, and Ellen Montgomery does it once again. She's just such a delightful author. He has so much spirit and is so funny, and gets into such funny scrapes, but I just love the way she sees the world. Her imagination is so vivid and wonderful. Another children's book I thought I would put in here is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This was a reread for me this year. It was so much fun. I just loved revisiting the March family. All the sisters are so fantastic. My family also paid a visit to Orchard House, which is the house that Louisa May Alcott lived in. We got to see her bedroom with her desk, and it was the house she kind of set Little Women in. And I feel like that visit is part of the reason why Little Women is on this list right now. It brought a whole new dimension to the characters to know more about Louisa May Alcott. She liked Victorian novels. They were the only kind of novel you could read while you were eating an apple. I really enjoyed Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons this year. It was the first Stella Gibbons that I'd ever read. A hilarious parody of like the sort of absurd melodramatic novels, and just very British, just super fun. "We're witches," said Hello. Many Thanks pointed meaningfully at his hat. Earlier this year, I read The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine M. Valente. It was so much fun. This is a children's book. It is a series. I definitely need to check out the rest of them. It's so whimsical, though, and unexpected and witty and fantastic. Definitely a reading highlight of 2016. "Pardon me, are you wearing burr, sir?" "That depends. Who's asking?" "To be sure, sir. I'm Alexander Hamilton. I'm at your service, sir. I have been looking for you." "I'm getting nervous." "Sir, I heard your name at Princeton. I was seeking an accelerated course of study. When I got sort of out of sorts with a buddy of yours, I might have punched him. It's a blur, sir. He handles the financials." "You punched the bursar." I could do the entire song, but don't worry, I won't. I didn't have a quotation from this next book, so I thought I'd give you a quotation from Hamilton instead, because the book is Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. It is the biography that inspired Lin-Manuel Miranda to write the musical Hamilton. I actually started reading the biography first, and then I listened to the complete Hamilton soundtrack, and it has just been such a delight to kind of read and listen to both of them side by side, because they both have such amazing writing, and they are such an echo of each other. Ron Chernow's biography is so well researched and so well written. It brings Hamilton to life in such an amazing way, and there are lots of themes and things that he points out that are so interesting that Lin-Manuel Miranda picked up on and then completely integrated into the musical. I haven't seen the musical, alas. I would really love to, but just listening to the soundtrack is so incredible. The songs are so well written and well crafted and so completely full of history and facts, and like so inspired by the biography, by Hamilton's writings. Both of them together have just been so much fun, the biography and the musical. So if you haven't checked out the biography or the musical, you need to go check them both out. I'm consulting my list, making sure I got them all. I would never have been able to make this video if I hadn't made a list first. Hopefully in a moment of clarity, I can get it. Alright, so those are my reading highlights from 2016. I can't wait to see what new favorites 2017 has in store. Thank you all so much for watching and following along this year. I would love to hear about your bookish favorites down in the comments. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed. I hope you have a very, very happy new year, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Bye!